Number 15. Claudia Banton. In August 2021, a 42-year-old New Yorker named Delia Johnson was shot execution-style from behind at point-blank range. The woman was walking along a busy sidewalk in Brooklyn's Crown Heights neighborhood when it happened. Surveillance footage of the horrifying crime shows a female suspect exiting the passenger side of a double-parked SUV, approaching the victim, shooting her, and calmly getting back into the vehicle. Shortly after the shooting, police pulled over a vehicle matching the description of the SUV associated with the crime. But at the time, they were under the impression that Johnson's killer was a man, and they let the vehicle's occupants go. They only later realized that they had let the accused killer, 42-year-old Claudia Banton, slip through their grasp. Johnson's family told the New York Daily News that they believe Banton followed the victim from a neighborhood funeral. The two women were once friends, but it's unclear what went so horribly wrong between them that it ended in murder. U.S. Marshals tracked Banton to an address in downtown Jacksonville, Florida. After conducting surveillance on her and confirming that she was the woman they were looking for, they apprehended her during a traffic stop. Banton was extradited to New York, where she faces a second-degree murder charge. The case appears to be ongoing. Number 14. Hakan Aysal. 32-year-old Semra Aysal was both heavily pregnant and terrified of heights when her husband, 40-year-old Hakan Aysal, decided to take her to a scenic overlook in southern Turkey in 2018. During the outing in what's known as Butterfly Valley, Hakan coaxed Semra to the edge of the cliff, saying that he wanted to take a selfie together. But instead of snapping a memorable photo, he shoved his 7 months pregnant wife over the edge, sending her plummeting 1,000 feet to her death. Just like anyone who shoves their partner off a ledge, Hakan attributed the tragedy to Semra losing her balance and falling. He then tried to collect a $40,000 life insurance policy he took out in his wife's name shortly before he killed her. Financial records showed that he had taken out 7 loans in Semra's name while she was still alive. Aysal denied murdering Semra. He claimed that he turned his back for just a few moments and suddenly heard Semra scream. When he turned around, she was gone. Police didn't believe the story, and Hakan was charged with murder. During the court proceedings, witnesses testified about how Hakan was eerily calm as he sought help for Semra and his unborn baby. He didn't even bother joining a passing driver who went to go search for Semra's body after Hakan flagged him down. In a chilling twist, another witness described how something about the couple's behavior toward each other prompted her and the person she was with to joke about which one might push the other off the cliff. And while nobody managed to record footage of Hakan pushing Semra off the cliff, someone else who was at the park that day captured a video of Hakan trying to persuade his wife over to the edge. In it, Hakan is acting overly pushy to the point where he's practically dragging Semra over to the edge. During Hakan's trial, Semra's brother described seeing no emotion from his brother-in-law right after Semra's death, even as the family went to retrieve the slain woman's body from the medical examiner's office. Hakan was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years. He appealed his conviction on the grounds of insanity, but the original ruling was upheld. Number 13. Billionaire couple Barry and Honey Sherman. In one of Canada's most perplexing unsolved murders, 75-year-old farmer billionaire Barry Sherman and his wife Honey were murdered inside their Toronto mansion on December 15, 2017. Both victims were positioned in a bizarre and seemingly symbolic fashion near their indoor pool. Anyone worth billions of dollars is naturally in danger by virtue of their wealth and the people who want to get their hands on it. Furthermore, Sherman had a reputation for making enemies through his aggressive business dealings. But police have ruled out many of the people that the cutthroat tycoon had bad blood with, and the case remains at a standstill as investigators hope for a smoking gun that is yet to come along. Almost everyone seen in surveillance footage from near the crime scene has been eliminated as a person of interest, but one individual has not even been identified. Authorities believe that figuring out who the person is could be the key to finally solving the homicide. At the same time, the police are being criticized for allegedly not prioritizing the case or doing more to solve it. In fact, the Shermans' children even felt obligated to hire private investigators as part of their own efforts to find answers. It wasn't until a second set of autopsies was ordered that authorities admitted that the couple had been murdered by an outside party rather than at their own hands, which was the initial theory. Simply put, the horrifying double homicide is shrouded in mystery, and some might even say that it has conspiracy written all over it. And until or unless someone comes forward with answers, including the possible identity of the person in the surveillance footage, the murders may never be solved. Number 12. The murder of Jason Vesper. Camera footage has proven to be a godsend when it comes to solving crimes and securing convictions in court, but sometimes it's not enough. One Nebraska family is still without answers more than 15 years after the murder of their loved one, 40-year-old Jason Vesper. It all started just days into the new year in 2008 when Vesper got into a heated argument with his wife Debbie. He left the house to cool off, and nearly all of his movements were captured on surveillance footage, starting from the moment he backed his pickup truck out of his driveway at 12:46 a.m. During the roughly 1-minute drive to the nearest convenience store, Vesper called his son Joshua to make sure he was okay amid the family drama. They hung up after a brief conversation, and Vesper entered the store to buy a soda and a pack of cigarettes. At 12:56 a.m., just 10 minutes from the time when Vesper left the house, a security camera at a city-owned property captured video of the moment police believe he first encountered his killer. In the clip, another car could be seen making a U-turn and following Vesper. About a minute later, a church camera recorded footage of Vesper and the car that appeared to be chasing him. The driver of the pursuing car seemed to be trying desperately to get Vesper to pull over by flashing his lights. Both vehicles stopped out of the camera's view, at which point detectives believe the suspect got out of their car and stabbed Vesper 16 times. At 1:06 a.m., Vesper was found clinging to life in his truck just blocks from his house. Investigators believe he was trying to make it home after being stabbed. Only 20 minutes passed between the time the victim left his house to the time he was found with stab wounds, and the actual stabbing was the only part of the ordeal that wasn't captured on camera. The stabbing had been brutal, and saving Vesper proved impossible. Police had a difficult time determining what type of vehicle the suspect was driving due to the brutal winter weather obscuring the camera's view. An expert has narrowed down the range of possible cars to a Cadillac DeVille or Fleetwood from sometime between 1985 and 1988, or an Oldsmobile 98 from sometime between 1985 and 1990. Vesper's wife has been cleared as a person of interest in the case. Authorities have never identified the vehicle or any suspects, and Vesper's killer remains at large. Number 11. Deadly domestic dispute. A domestic dispute in Las Vegas took a deadly turn in November of 2021 when a husband allegedly got into his pickup truck and mowed down his wife's illicit lover. According to prosecutors, 32-year-old Michael Daniels was seen ramming into the victim's motorcycle on surveillance footage from the crime scene. The victim, 24-year-old Ryan Pillar, died from his injuries, and based on the footage, authorities concluded that the crash was intentional. At the time, Daniels was already wearing an ankle monitor due to his prior criminal cases. He had also been arrested at least 3 times for allegedly beating up his estranged wife. In one case, he was accused of strangling the victim with an extension cord. During another dispute in 2018, Daniels was accused of firing live rounds at his wife, her father, and her new partner. The following year, he was busted for grand larceny. Despite his repeated arrests, Daniels seemed to always avoid any major consequences. But now that a life has been taken, authorities are singing a different tune. Prosecutors charge Daniels with murder, and while the case appears to be ongoing, he probably won't be getting off scot-free this time. Number 10. Deshaun Thomas. In a horrifying act of violence that was captured on camera in early 2023, a homeless man named David Saldana was fatally shot in broad daylight in St. Louis, Missouri. Footage showed the shooter talking on his cell phone while loading his gun. He then approached Saldana from behind as he sat on a sidewalk and fired a bullet into the back of his head. The suspect, 23-year-old Deshaun Thomas, fled the scene and was captured outside the city's public library shortly after the shooting. He was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. For now, the motive behind the incident remains unclear. Rumors claim that Thomas and Saldana had a disagreement outside a Shell gas station earlier that day. It's unclear whether they knew each other. This didn't surprise local business owner Brad Waldrop, who told Newsweek that there have been 20 shootings at that particular Shell gas station since 2019 and around 600 calls for emergency services. Authorities remain tight-lipped about the details of the crime as the case works its way through the court system. Number 9. Marcus Ely and Mario Fogler. 21-year-old Malcolm Avery Johnson Jr. was walking along a Miami sidewalk in May of 2023 when he got into a confrontation with the occupants of a passing car. Surveillance footage showed a black Nissan Maxima pulling up to Johnson at around 1 o'clock in the morning. A suspect identified by police as 20-year-old Marcus Ely could be seen exiting the passenger side of the vehicle and pointing a gun at Johnson. According to an arrest warrant, Ely grabbed Johnson's chain while another suspect, 22-year-old Mario Fogler, got out of the car with a gun in his hand. Fogler went through the victim's pockets as Ely struggled to maintain control of Johnson. During the struggle, Ely allegedly fired 4 rounds at Johnson, striking him in the head and chest. The suspects fled the scene and Johnson was found dead from his injuries with his broken chain laying on the ground nearby. Police identified the vehicle the suspects were driving via a license plate reader. It was a rental car that had been reported stolen by a woman who accused 3 men she was hanging out with of driving off in it. She identified one of the alleged thieves as a man named Marcus and said that he threatened to kill her when she called him and told him to return the car. The woman also provided police with a photo of the second suspect, Mario Fogler, who was identified using facial recognition technology. Fogler and Ely were taken into custody in Hollywood, Florida, close to where the stolen car was found abandoned. Ely's brother, who works as a police investigator in Georgia, contacted law enforcement claiming that Ely threatened to kill their mother on the night of Johnson's murder. He reportedly identified Ely in the video of the shooting. Both suspects remain behind bars in Miami-Dade County, where they each face a first-degree murder charge. Number 8. The murder of Elizabeth Liz Barraza. 29-year-old Elizabeth Liz Barraza and her husband Sergio were just days away from leaving for a Florida vacation to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary in early 2019 when she decided to hold a yard sale to make some extra money for the trip. As Sergio left for work one morning, Liz set up for the sale outside the couple's Tomball, Texas home. Surveillance footage would later show that Sergio had just driven away from the house when an unidentified individual, who appeared to be wearing a disguise, crept up the driveway toward Liz. In the video, Liz could be heard greeting the person, followed by a brief conversation lasting no more than 6 seconds. The mysterious figure suddenly shot the young woman 3 times at point-blank range with a revolver, causing her to collapse. As Liz lay dying on the ground, the killer stood over her and fired 1 last shot before sprinting away from the scene. The footage showed the killer driving away in a Nissan Frontier pickup truck, which could also be seen driving around the neighborhood before and after the murder. Police released the video to the public in hopes that someone would come forward with helpful information, but the killer remains at large. In an interview with local station KHOU in early 2023, Sergio Barraza said he understands why some people might see him as the prime suspect in the case. After all, a murder victim's spouse often is, but he maintains that he had nothing to do with Liz's death and that he would love to see the case solved. In fact, he said it scares him to know the killer is still out there. He has also never been charged in connection with the murder. Number 7. Scott Jones. 44-year-old Deborah DePinto was found unresponsive and foaming at the mouth inside a Boulder, Colorado trailer park office in 2018. She was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. Just hours earlier, DePinto had told her husband of more than 10 years, 47-year-old Scott Jones, that she was done with their marriage and that she planned to leave him. Investigators quickly uncovered audio and video recordings of Jones and DePinto arguing in the office. The two could be seen gesturing angrily at each other before disappearing off camera into another room. While the fatal attack occurred out of view, the surveillance camera captured audio recordings of the escalating disagreement. disagreement. DePinto repeatedly told Jones that she no longer wanted to be with him. She could also be heard saying, "You can't force me to love you anymore," telling Jones that he made her feel terrible and instructing him to stop blocking the doorway. Shortly thereafter, DePinto screamed twice. It was clear, based on the banging, slapping, and other sounds, that a struggle was occurring. Jones could be heard shouting, "You're done," as DePinto gasped for air and begged for help. Her pleas were followed by a repeated thumping sound until finally all went silent. After the attack, Jones paced around and talked to himself, repeatedly saying, "Oh my God." He initially denied any involvement in Deborah's death, but he changed his story when police confronted him with the recording. Jones allegedly said that Deborah died of asphyxiation and that he didn't mean to do it, but that everything was going so fast. The accused wife killer claimed that Deborah was cheating on him with several men and rubbing it in his face, and that he just snapped. A jury found Jones guilty of second-degree murder in December 2019. He received a maximum sentence of 48 years in prison. Number 6. The murder of Tyesha Merritt. 27-year-old Tyesha Merritt was on her way to a family barbecue in Sunnyvale, Texas with her brother and his 3 children in June of 2023 when they were met with unexpected violence. Surveillance footage showed a newer model black Toyota Camry pulling up behind Tyesha's parked vehicle outside a townhome complex. A masked gunman could be seen exiting the front passenger side of the Toyota, approaching the vehicle occupied by Tyesha and her family. He opened fire on the occupants, firing multiple bullets into Tyesha's midsection and injuring everyone else. In what became Sunnyvale's first murder in 20 years, Tyesha died from her injuries. The killer's motive remains unclear. Law enforcement has shared the video with the public in hopes that someone with crucial information will come forward and help identify the suspects. Unfortunately, the case remains unsolved, and if anyone knows anything, they're keeping it to themselves. The town of Sunnyvale is offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and/or conviction of the suspects. Number 5. Vesta Lee Flanagan. Reporter Allison Parker and photojournalist Adam Ward had no idea that a disgruntled former colleague was lurking nearby while they reported live in Virginia one morning in 2015. The pair were interviewing Monetta's Chamber of Commerce director Vicki Gardner for local station WDBJ7 when shots suddenly rang out. The gunfire was followed by screams as the shooter fired at Parker, Gardner, and Ward, who all fell to the ground. Before the broadcast was shut off and turned back over to the studio, Ward's camera caught a brief glimpse of the shooter, who fired 15 shots total. Parker and Ward died in the shooting, while Gardner played dead and waited for help to arrive. In the meantime, the gunman ran off. The team over at the news studio recognized the shooter as a former employee named Vesta Lee Flanagan, who had been fired after his colleagues complained about feeling uncomfortable and threatened near him. He had a history of acting aggressive at work and was let go less than a year after starting the job. It was the second time a news station fired Flanagan for his alarming behavior. Hours after the shooting, he posted a tweet featuring disturbing video footage of Ward's final moments and complaining that she complained to human resources about him after working with him one time. He then led police on a high-speed chase and crashed his car, at which point he decided that taking his life was the better alternative to facing justice for his crimes. Number 4. Nerman Sulejmanovic. In August of 2023, a 35-year-old Bosnian bodybuilder named Nerman Sulejmanovic live-streamed a horrific crime spree in a series of videos that he posted on social media. It all started during a morning broadcast when Sulejmanovic said that everyone was about to witness a live execution. He then turned the camera to his bleeding and disfigured ex-wife and basically said that this was what he did to her for calling the police on him. Around 12,000 people were watching as Sulejmanovic shot his wife in the head. The enraged athlete then proceeded to go on a shooting spree in the city of Gradačec while the police chased after him, during which time he claimed to have killed at least 2 more people. Authorities later identified the second and third victims as a man and his son. Sulejmanovic also injured 3 more victims, including a police officer and 2 civilians, and he also died during his unchecked rampage. A police spokesperson condemned the senseless violence, and while the agency declined to offer a motive for the crimes, it was clear during Sulejmanovic's broadcast that he was upset with his ex for reporting him to the police for domestic abuse. The bodybuilder also had a criminal history, including charges for smuggling drugs and attacking a police officer. In a statement, the United Nations expressed feeling horrified by the live-streamed murder and a theme of femicide that it conveyed. The agency urged authorities in Bosnia and Herzegovina to do everything in their power to eliminate the senseless murder of women throughout the country. Number 3. Murder on the high seas. In 2015, horrifying footage surfaced of a man being mercilessly shot to death on the open ocean. In the video, the man could be seen raising his hands as a display of surrender just moments before a bullet struck him in the head. The water turned red with blood as the victim floated face down. At least 40 more rounds were shot as the killer fired indiscriminately at 3 other men as they clung to what looked like the debris of a wrecked wooden boat. The bullets came from one of several tuna longliners that surrounded the unarmed men during their desperate final moments. Over one of the ship's loudspeakers, someone could be heard shouting, "Shoot, shoot, shoot." Even more disturbingly, several crew members laughed about the murders after the fact and posed for selfies. According to the New York Times, dozens of witnesses from at least 4 ships witnessed the homicides, yet nobody came forward to identify the killer or killers. In fact, nobody even reported the crime. Under maritime law, nobody was required to do so. Law enforcement only learned about the incident after someone found footage of it on a cell phone that was left inside a taxi in Fiji, then reposted the video online. No bodies were ever found, and based on the clip alone, authorities were unable to identify where the murders occurred or who was involved. Unfortunately, it's unlikely that justice will ever be served. The killings raised larger questions, however, about the murky nature of maritime law and why it's apparently so easy to get away with murder at sea. Numerous activists and agencies called for changes that would make it easier to prosecute these types of cases and would clarify which authorities are responsible for doing so. Number 2. The murder of Slim 400. A rapper named Vincent Cochran, better known by his stage name Slim 400, was exiting his vehicle in front of his Los Angeles home in late 2021 when someone literally dragged him off his porch and shot him multiple times at point-blank range. Doorbell camera footage of the incident showed Slim 400 and the shooter exchanging words before the killer brandished a gun and pulled the trigger. There were no immediate arrests in the case. 7 months later, in June of 2022, authorities announced the arrests of 2 suspects, 33-year-old Michael Lanell Terry and 42-year-old Tamra Lynn Bell. Michael Terry faces a murder charge, while Tamra Bell was charged with 1 felony count of accessory after the fact. Both cases appear to be ongoing. Police have revealed few details about the crime and have declined to identify a possible motive. Number 1. The murder of Maurice Gatson. Shortly before 1 o'clock in the morning on October 3, 2015, police responded to a call about a shooting outside the Palace Adult Entertainment Club in Portland, Oregon. 45-year-old Maurice Gatson was fatally struck by a bullet. He was already dead by the time police arrived. No suspects were ever identified or arrested in the case, despite the murder being captured on camera. Authorities released the surveillance footage in hopes that someone would recognize the shooter and come forward with information that could help solve the case. But nearly 8 years later, and even after a $2,500 reward was offered, the killer's identity remains a mystery. Number 10. Javon Prather. The palpable animosity between Fairfax, Virginia neighbors Michael Hettle, a former police officer and NASA executive in his late 40s, and Javon Prather, a young soldier for the Maryland National Guard, started in 2016 with a few petty disagreements. Tensions eventually grew over the years as Hettle constantly complained about Prather and his wife Janelle drinking, playing loud music, and fighting. The Prathers, on the other hand, got the impression that Hettle was racist. Hettle complained so often that in 2020 the neighborhood's HOA told him that there was nothing else they could do. One morning he sent the HOA an email warning that the fight could result in tragedy if no one else stepped in. In a terrifying scene captured by Hettle's Ring camera not long after, Prather went over to his neighbor's house and knocked on the door. Hettle answered and, without hesitation, immediately opened fire, shooting his neighbor in the abdomen and continuing to fire as Prather collapsed and stopped moving. He then pointed the loaded weapon at Janelle, who had run over in the meantime to see what the commotion was all about. Authorities soon charged Hettel with murder. He argued that he shot Prather out of self-defense, but the prosecutor had other ideas, describing it as an execution. The jury found Hettel guilty, and he was given a life sentence in prison. Number 9. Pat Wright. In May 2021, 55-year-old Pat Wright and his wife were stepping out of a convenience store in Houston, Texas late at night when a mysterious masked gunman mercilessly opened fire on him, killing him right there in the parking lot. The suspect then fled on foot and was never caught, even after police released footage of the man they believe murdered Wright. They also seem to have no idea what the killer's motive for this crime was, especially since Wright was a well-respected member of the community with no known enemies. Investigators were also confused, since Wright and his killer didn't exchange a single word before the murder took place. According to detectives, the suspect even walked past the store 10 minutes before he fatally ambushed the victim and his terrified wife. Number 8. Scott Roberts. In April 2023, 66-year-old Jeffrey Roberts drove over 700 miles from Long Beach, California, to stop by his brother Scott's house in North Ogden, Utah. Scott and his wife Jody were eating dinner at the time when Jeffrey's van pulled up to the residence unannounced. Camera footage from the doorbell showed Scott opening the door to Jeffrey, who casually said, "What's up?" upon seeing his brother. Seemingly confused by the surprise visit, Scott replied, "What are you doing?" Jeffrey then asked if their mother was inside, and Scott clarified that she was actually living in Missouri and had been there for a little over a year. Without warning, Jeffrey then took out a gun and fired at least 8 bullets into Scott, who screamed at Jody to run away. At least one neighbor called 911 after hearing the thundering gunshots. One caller reported seeing a man and a van that he didn't recognize in the victim's driveway. He said that he wasn't entirely sure if he heard gunshots, but he asked police to stop by and check the situation out, just in case. Scott died from his injuries, and Jody was shot but survived her wounds. Jeffrey refused to work with the responding officers. Using road flares, he set Scott's house on fire before leaving the residence and engaging in a shootout with law enforcement. He died in the exchange of gunfire, and his motive for killing his brother in cold blood remains unclear to this day. A family friend told ABC7 that family estrangement played a factor in the tragedy, and that others pushed Jeffrey to the brink. She unfortunately didn't go into detail, leaving us to wonder what really happened behind the scenes. Number 7. Bob Lee. In April 2023, the founder of Cash App, Bob Lee, was brutally stabbed to death on a sidewalk in San Francisco during the early morning while visiting from Miami. Surveillance footage from that day showed the 43-year-old clinging onto his side while holding his cell phone with his other hand. He left a trail of blood on the concrete behind him as he helplessly stumbled and collapsed. He held on to life long enough to dial 911, but was unresponsive and bleeding uncontrollably when police got to the scene. Lee was immediately rushed to a nearby hospital, where he died on the operating table in the middle of an emergency surgery. The day before his death, Lee had a few drinks at a friend's apartment with some people, including 38-year-old IT consultant Nima Mameni and his sister, Kazar Eliasnia. He eventually went back to his hotel room with a friend who overheard Mameni asking Lee over the phone if his sister had taken drugs or done anything overly inappropriate during the meetup. Lee did his best to reassure Mameni that Eliasnia had behaved well at the party. Eliasnia is actually married to a prominent plastic surgeon. The nature of her relationship with Lee and whether her marriage was struggling at the time of the murder is unclear, but Lee went to the woman's house later that night and was seen leaving the building about an hour and 20 minutes later with her brother inside his car. Security footage showed Mameni's car turning the opposite direction of Lee's hotel. Lee and Mameni were also seen walking together to a dark, secluded area on surveillance video. In one clip, one of the men seemed to lunge at the other with some kind of object before leaving the scene. Moments later, Lee staggered down the sidewalk with a stab wound in his heart. While searching through Lee's phone, detectives discovered a text message from Eliasnia expressing concern for his well-being and acknowledging that her brother came way down hard on him during the talk they had the previous night. She then thanked Lee for handling the situation with so much class. A toxicology report showed that Lee had ingested alcohol, cocaine, and ketamine in his system before he died. Mameni's defense attorney, Paula Canny, suggested that drug use may have played a role in whatever altercation took place before the victim's death, but prosecutors believe that Mameni murdered Lee in cold blood, possibly as the result of some sort of disagreement over his sister. The judge overseeing the case has since ruled that Mameni will face trial for murder, but a court date has not yet been set. Number 6. Laura Carlton. 66-year-old mother of 9 Laura Carlton believed she was a loyal ally to the LGBTQ+ community, so it was only natural that she proudly hung a rainbow flag outside the clothing store she owned in Cedar Glen, California. She was occasionally harassed over the flag, and it was occasionally even torn down, but she'd always put another one up as a replacement, and she refused to let anyone intimidate her into taking it down for good. In a horrifying encounter that was caught on surveillance video in August 2023, a person passing by, later identified as 27-year-old Travis Ikeguchi, was heard hurling homophobic slurs towards Carlton. As the argument grew more and more heated, Ikeguchi allegedly pulled a gun out and shot the businesswoman dead directly in front of her store. By the time police got to the scene and found Carlton dying on the pavement, the shooter had already fled the area. When officers finally located Ikeguchi, he shot at them. The police returned fire, eventually killing him. In the aftermath, investigators took a closer look at the man's social media and found a barrage of homophobic, anti-Semitic, and hate-filled content. Ikeguchi used Christianity to justify his beliefs and seemed to be particularly outraged about pride flags hanging outside Carlton's store. Speaking with the New York Times, Carlton's 28-year-old daughter, Ari Carlton, described her mother as a brave pillar of the community who died defending something important to her. Number 5. XXXTentacion. The Florida-based rapper and singer-songwriter Yase Dwayne Ricardo Onfroy, better known as XXXTentacion, gained a cult following in the emo rap genre. He became famous after releasing music on SoundCloud in 2013 and was known for his versatility in musical styles. But the young musician's success was controversial. Onfroy was no stranger to violence and legal issues, and he had his fair share of enemies. During a performance in 2017, someone charged him from the side of the stage and punched him, knocking him unconscious. In 2018, the rapper was trying to leave a motorsports store in Broward County when another vehicle suddenly blocked him from exiting the parking lot. 2 armed men then approached Onfroy's BMW and shot him multiple times before stealing a Louis Vuitton bag with $50,000 in it. The shooters then fled the scene, and Onfroy was pronounced dead at a hospital. Authorities charged Michael Boatwright, Dedrick Williams, and Trayvon Newsom with robbery, first-degree murder, and more. During their trial in 2023, jurors were required to watch graphic surveillance footage of the murder, which has not yet been released to the public. All 3 defendants were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. A 4th suspect, Robert Allen, pleaded guilty to a reduced second-degree murder charge in exchange for testifying against his co-conspirators. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Number 4. German Ariel Montes de Oca Ramirez. During one summer morning in August 2021, 31-year-old Ariel Montes de Oca Ramirez and 29-year-old Ishmael Rodriguez Rosado got into a fight outside a Latin American restaurant in Long Island, New York. During the exchange, Rodriguez Rosado took out a 9mm handgun and shot Montes de Oca Ramirez 4 times. By the time police responded to a witness's 911 call, Rodriguez Rosado had already fled the scene. Undercover officers saw the suspected shooter's SUV parked outside a gas station a short while later and tried to block the car in. Rodriguez Rosado hit one of the patrol vehicles as he escaped the station. The police then chased after him and managed to disable his SUV with a technique called the pit maneuver, which involves tapping the rear end of a vehicle and causing it to spin out of the driver's control. Detectives retrieved a murder weapon with help of a K9 unit and also obtained surveillance footage from the restaurant's security cameras, which caught the murder on video. In 2023, Rodriguez Rosado pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and 2 weapon-related charges. He remains in custody to this day while awaiting sentencing. Number 3. Andreas Probst. In a horrifying act of violence against an elderly man, a group of cruel teenagers fatally mowed down 64-year-old retired police officer Andreas Probst while he was riding his bike in Las Vegas during September 2019. The young man in the passenger seat caught footage of the unprovoked killing while encouraging the driver to hit Probst in the ass. In the video, the driver was heard saying, "Ready?" to his friend. He then pulled up right behind Probst, who was in the bike lane, honked his horn and plowed into the cyclist, who was sent flying. The suspect who was filming captured footage of Probst as he lay dying on the side of the road. The heartless teens could be heard laughing as they drove away, showing not even a shred of concern for the man they just rammed into. Based on the content featured in the video, investigators concluded that the suspect hit the senior citizen on purpose and that this was no accident. Police were able to identify the suspects after the footage popped up online. The driver and passenger are now facing murder charges for the disturbing hit and run. Number 2. Jose Juarez and Joshua Pena. During the summer of 2023, when an argument broke out between multiple gang members outside of a gas station in Bakersfield, California, it initially seemed as if the men were about to settle their disagreement in a fistfight. But the situation quickly grew deadly when a man pulled a gun out and opened fire on his rivals. 28-year-olds Jose Juarez and Joshua Pena were killed at the scene. The suspected shooter, 19-year-old Brian Heredia, ran away in a Dodge Ram pickup truck, leading cops on a high-speed chase that finally ended when an officer rear-ended him and disabled the vehicle. Heredia and the truck's other occupants left the scene on foot, but police officers quickly caught up to him and another suspect, 20-year-old Saul Ochoa. They arrested a third suspect, 24-year-old Rito Castillo, about 1 week later. All 3 suspects are facing first-degree murder charges and are being held without bail pending the results of their cases. Number 1. Christopher Williams. 39-year-old Christopher Williams was walking down a sidewalk in Chicago in 2021 when someone opened fire on him in broad daylight from a gray Ford Fusion. The disturbing act of violence was caught on video by a nearby doorbell camera, but the case remains unsolved to this day. Nobody knows who might have wanted to kill the father of 5, who was a devoted and hard-working family man who seemingly had no major problems with anyone. Williams' family members told ABC7 Chicago that law enforcement believes the killer may have thought he was someone else. Someone turned the murder weapon into authorities a few months after the shooting, but just like the surveillance footage, it seemed to bring investigators no closer to closing the case. Over 2 years after Williams' death, his widow Markeisha and his surviving loved ones were frustrated with the lack of progress in finding the killer. Christopher's mother, Vicky Armstrong Williams, said that she'll never have closure even if the case gets solved, but that learning who was responsible for her son's death would at least give her a bit of peace. Authorities are still hoping someone with information will come forward and help solve the case so they can give Williams' family the overdue answers they deserve. Number 8. James and Lisa Goy. A long-standing dispute between 47-year-old Jeffrey Spade and his neighbors James and Lisa Goy came to a deadly end after a brutal winter storm in early 2021. According to news reports, the Goys were shoveling their parking spots and dumping the snow across the street on Spade's property. Spade went outside and asked the couple to stop, and a heated argument quickly broke out. Surveillance footage showed the 2 parties hurling threats and insults at one another, with James Goy threatening to make Spade's life a living hell. The Goys continued to taunt Spade until the moment he pulled a gun while walking toward them. James yelled at Spade to put the gun down, but instead, Spade began firing at the couple, striking them both and chasing after James as he tried running away. In the video, Lisa could be heard saying a final "F you" to Spade as he continued shooting her in the middle of the street. After emptying the gun, Spade went back inside his house and retrieved an AR-style rifle. He mercilessly fired bullets at the couple before saying, "You could have kept your mouth shut," and running back inside. Police were just arriving at the scene when they heard a gunshot from inside, where they found Spade dead from a bullet wound. The horrifying footage garnered mixed reactions. Some people sympathized with the Goys, who left behind a son, while others accused the couple of pushing Spade to his breaking point. But as the saying goes, it takes two to tango, and 3 lives were needlessly lost when petty drama spiraled out of control. Number 7. Aaron Howard. In a shocking act of violence that was captured on camera, 37-year-old Aaron Howard was shot to death outside his home in Abilene, Texas, during an argument with his neighbors in 2018. The deadly disagreement started out as a petty spat days earlier, when Howard put an old mattress in a dumpster outside their apartment building. He found the mattress back in his yard the next day, so he returned it to the dumpster. His neighbor, 67-year-old John Miller, threw the mattress back into Howard's yard. It's unclear why Miller had a problem with the mattress being in the dumpster, which was where it was supposed to go. A confrontation between Howard and Miller quickly escalated into an aggressive shouting match. Footage recorded by Howard's fiancée, Kara Box, showed Miller threatening Howard with a pistol. Moments later, Miller's 30-year-old son, Michael, appeared with a shotgun. Howard yelled at the pair to put down their weapons, but the fight only became more heated. In an attempt to de-escalate things, Kara tried to get between the two parties, but the Millers opened fire on the couple, fatally striking Howard and narrowly missing Kara. After years of court delays, John and Michael Miller are scheduled to go on trial for murder in 2023. They plan to argue that they acted in self-defense under the state's Stand Your Ground law. Kara stands by her belief that Howard was needlessly murdered in cold blood and told reporters that she wants people to know the truth about what happened. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 6. Bird and Melanie Billings. After becoming extremely successful and wealthy, 66-year-old Florida businessman Bud Billings and his third wife, 43-year-old Melanie, adopted 13 kids. The family lived in a sprawling mansion in Pensacola's Beulah neighborhood, but their seemingly blissful home life was tragically interrupted one evening in July of 2009, when Bud and Melanie were found shot to death inside their bedroom. Surveillance footage from the home's 16 security cameras shows a junky old red van pulling up to the house. 3 masked suspects dressed in ninja-like garb exited the vehicle armed with guns and entered the residence through separate doors, while 2 additional intruders approached from a nearby wooded area. In the video, Bud Billings could be seen raising his hands in the air and briefly struggling with the intruders, who led him and Melanie into their bedroom at gunpoint. There were no security cameras in the bedroom, where the suspects executed the couple in cold blood. Bud and Melanie were each shot 6 times. Just 5 minutes after entering the house, the intruders were seen leaving with a microwave-sized safe. Investigators narrowed in on 35-year-old Leonard Patrick Gonzalez Jr. as the suspected mastermind of the plot. His father, 56-year-old Leonard Patrick Gonzalez Sr., admitted to driving the getaway van. Gonzalez Jr.'s landlord and friend, Pamela Long Wiggins, was deeply involved in the planning of the crime. She also helped hide and dispose of evidence, including the safe. Altogether, 8 people were arrested in connection with the double homicide. None of them had any direct ties with the Billings, whom they targeted for the obvious fact that the family had money. The killers reportedly believed that their victims had millions of dollars of cash in the home, only to find that the safe was filled with identity documents, items of sentimental value, and other things that weren't worth the grand fortune that the suspects were expecting. Leonard Gonzalez Jr. was sentenced to death and remains on death row to this day. He continues to maintain his innocence from behind bars. Defendants Donnie Stallworth and Wayne Calderon received multiple life sentences, while the rest of the remaining 5 conspirators received sentences ranging between 17.5 and 28 years. Number 5. Richard Arenas. 46-year-old Richard Arenas was shot dead in 2013 while working on a car outside his home in Providence, Rhode Island. His nephew was with him that day and had stepped inside for just a few moments when a killer had fired 3 bullets into the back of Richard's head, giving him absolutely no opportunity to run or defend himself. Surveillance video from around a neighborhood showed a man with distinctly patterned shorts walking around the area shortly before Richard's murder. Later identified as 19-year-old Judia Dixon, the suspicious individual could be seen walking up to the victim's home to watch what was going on. At one point, the suspect left the home and returned with his hoodie pulled up over his head to conceal his face. Right after Richard was shot, the suspect was seen running from the direction of the scene in security footage captured from nearby homes. While following the man's path based on the videos, investigators found the murder weapon wrapped in a sweatshirt. Police caught up with the suspect a little while later when he was seen at another home in the area. Dixon fled the scene, leaving his distinctive shorts behind at the residence. Dixon was soon captured and charged with Richard's murder. The motive behind the disturbing crime remains a mystery to this day. He was also charged in connection with a non-fatal shooting that had occurred the previous year. As part of a plea deal, Dixon took responsibility for both crimes and was sentenced to life plus 20 years, ensuring that he'll never get out of prison. Number 4. Andrew Janacek. 27-year-old Andrew Janacek was shot dead in a parking lot in Edgewater, Colorado in April 2018 while picking up dinner for his girlfriend. Witnesses reported seeing the shooter leaving in a getaway car as Janacek lay face down on the ground, dying from a single bullet wound to the chest. Janacek's wallet and phone were found near his body, initially leading investigators to suspect that robbery was not a motive in his murder, but surveillance footage suggested otherwise. In the video, Janacek could be seen dropping his wallet on the ground and attempting to disarm his attacker. He collapsed during the struggle, at which point the suspect got into the passenger side of a waiting sedan. The car ran over Janacek's leg as it sped off from the scene. For the next 3 days, investigators collected witness accounts of the suspect and getaway car, surveillance footage from other locations, and information from a neighboring police department that suspected the same group in another burglary. They identified 21-year-old Alicia Valdez, 21-year-old Devin Trist Howard, and 20-year-old Caleb Vigil as the prime suspects, and arrested the trio on a multitude of charges. Devin Howard drove the getaway car, which was owned by Alicia Valdez, while Caleb Vigil carried out the actual attack on Janacek. Howard and Vigil were each convicted of 16 or more counts, including murder, attempted murder, aggravated robbery, and conspiracy to commit murder. The court sentenced Howard to life plus 118 years, and Vigil to life plus 279 years. Alicia Valdez was found guilty of murder, attempted aggravated robbery, and conspiracy to commit robbery, and is serving a life sentence without parole. Number 3. James Enright. When 27-year-old outdoor enthusiast James Enright found himself wanting to devote more time to hunting and fishing, he moved from his hometown just outside the city of Vancouver to the more remote Vancouver Island. On Valentine's Day 2005, he met up with his friends Tori and Brandon for an anti-Valentine's Day hangout session. Shortly before 1 o'clock in the morning, the trio arrived at the Edmonds SkyTrain station in Burnaby, where Brandon planned to catch a train home. In a terrifying turn of events that was captured on camera, the friends arrived at the station as a fight broke out between two groups of men. Tori began filming the ordeal on her cell phone from Enright's car. One particularly hostile man was seen acting out in a fit of rage with his shirt off while allegedly hurling racial slurs at his adversaries. When he saw Tori recording, he approached the car and punched the young woman in the face while yelling that he didn't care if she was a girl. Tori could be heard screaming as the camera went blank. Meanwhile, surveillance cameras continued rolling as Enright tried intervening to protect Tori. He exchanged a few punches with one of the suspects before suddenly falling backwards onto the floor. Enright had been stabbed, and he died from his injuries. Police arrested 18-year-old Teitusi Vikalani, who told investigators that he attacked Enright and his friends because they were filming the fight that was already going on. He denied hurting anyone and was released due to a lack of evidence. While reviewing surveillance footage, law enforcement gained a clearer understanding of the situation. They arrested Vikalani and another suspect, 22-year-old Jesse Selim, who admitted to stabbing Enright but claimed that he acted in self-defense. Selim was initially charged with murder but pleaded guilty to a reduced manslaughter charge and was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Vikalani also pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was handed a 6-month sentence. Number 2. Nathan Trapazzano. During his daily walk near his home in Indianapolis one morning in April 2014, 24-year-old computer programmer and father-to-be Nathan Trapezzano was attacked by two men. Security footage showed one of the suspects forcefully guiding Trapezzano into a parking lot and then shooting him in the abdomen. Nathan died from his injuries, leaving behind an expectant wife just days before his first wedding anniversary. Authorities quickly zeroed in on a troubled young man named Simeon Adams, who was suspected of killing Trapezzano during a violent crime spree he committed while awaiting a court hearing for 13 alleged probation violations. Adams' probation officer could have had him locked up during that time, and it would have been appropriate given his extensive criminal history. But she didn't, and he was free to continue wreaking havoc in the streets. Trapezzano's family already had to deal with wondering why Adams even had the opportunity to kill Nathan when they were dealt another blow. As part of a plea deal, Adams would admit to murder in exchange for a 55-year sentence, as opposed to the 78 years he could have otherwise faced. And he's still likely to see freedom far earlier than that. Based on good behavior and other factors, he could be released as early as 2048, at the age of 41, after serving just 33 years. While they considered the options given to them to be a far cry from justice, Trapezzano's family agreed to the deal because it at least guaranteed that Adams would serve prison time. They didn't want the unpredictability of a trial, which would have risked an even lighter punishment, and they were at least glad to know that at least for now, the serial offender is behind bars. Number 1. Anthony Blaylock. Shortly after 2 a.m. one morning in August 2017, a patrolling officer in Evansville, Indiana, overheard gunshots coming from the direction of a nearby American Legion post. He rushed to the scene, where he found 32-year-old father of 3, Anthony Blaylock, clinging to life in the parking lot with multiple gunshot wounds to his torso. He died on the way to the hospital. 3 other gunshot victims at the scene survived their injuries. Court documents state that police tried interviewing around a dozen people who were mostly uncooperative, but a few people were eventually willing to talk. At least one witness mentioned that Blaylock had argued with his cousin, 21-year-old Darius Bushrod, over money earlier that night. Security footage from the Legion's cameras showed the two men arguing in the parking lot after initially being separated by bystanders. In the video, Bushrod appeared to back away while shooting repeatedly at Blaylock. By the time an arrest warrant was issued for Bushrod, he had gone on the run. He was captured several months later in early 2018 after attempting to run from a house he was hiding out in as law enforcement closed in on the property. Bushrod was convicted of first-degree murder and received a 75-year prison sentence. If he lives to see freedom again, he probably won't experience it for very long. Records list his projected release date as 2074, at which point he'll be 78 years old. Thanks for watching. Would you rather live with the shame of accidentally deleting footage of a murder from a surveillance camera, knowing it could make or break the case, or with discovering that someone had talked about their murder plans within earshot of your doorbell camera, and that you could have prevented a tragedy if you had watched the footage sooner? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.